Better takes, better vibes, better MMA. We are back coming at you guys with a recap of the main event of UFC 302, Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. This has been a very controversial fight for a lot of reasons, mainly being the fact that we're not really sure where Dustin Poirier goes in his career after this point. There's been a lot of talk about this possibly being his last fight. But beyond that, we have started to see Islam Makhachev look more and more human as he continues to defend his title. Now, credit to Islam where credit is due. He had an amazing finish against Volkanovski in their second fight, but we have to put that into context that was Volkanovski who was drinking alcohol every day, stepping in on 11 days' notice against Islam Makhachev, the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world. Now, what has to be recognized, and I feel like what has been recognized by the majority of the MMA community, is that Dustin Poirier has been given his flowers for what a truly valiant effort he put up against Islam Makhachev, and for what a great fight he was able to put on when myself and most hardcore fans were picking Islam Makhachev to get the submission within the first 3 rounds, if not the very first round. We saw Dustin Poirier being put into submissions in the first round on multiple occasions and in the second round, and he was able to defend those quite well. Islam Makhachev had long periods of time where he was on Dustin Poirier's back and he had the body triangle. What we learned from that moment specifically was that Islam Makhachev is not the same sort of killer submission specialist like somebody like a Charles Oliveira, where if you have this individual on your back, they're going to be attempting submissions and they're going to be setting up the rear naked choke in multiple ways. Though I do think some of this is due to Islam Makhachev's priority to maintain the position and not always attempt to go for the submission attempt and give his opponent the opportunity to slip out and stand to his feet, which we saw Dustin Poirier was able to do with greater success later on in the fight. He was able to shrug off Islam Makhachev, deny some of the takedowns, and actually have an ability to get back up to his feet, whereas Dustin Poirier wouldn't have that same ability against a Khabib Nurmagomedov, or at least he wouldn't find nearly close to the same amount of success when it comes to getting back up to his feet against somebody like a Khabib Nurmagomedov. These differences that we're beginning to see in between Islam Makhachev as a champion in comparison to somebody like Charles Oliveira or Khabib Nurmagomedov especially. Khabib is, of course, Islam's mentor and closest training partner and essentially now his coach. If anybody knows how to game plan a fight with their particular skill set, Khabib Nurmagomedov knows how to do it better than anybody. And to see Islam Makhachev continuing to compromise with Dustin Poirier in these striking exchanges, being okay with standing with Dustin on the feet instead of looking for space and creating distance between them and trying to set up the takedown. He's far too comfortable with trying to counter Dustin Poirier is what I found in that fight. And even in the post-fight press conference, Islam Makhachev was stating that he would have liked to have stood on the feet with Dustin Poirier more because he feels like he could have knocked Dustin Poirier out. Now, there's a possibility where, of course, Islam Makhachev can knock out Dustin Poirier. Islam Makhachev wasn't being schooled on the feet. But what it makes clear about Islam Makhachev's spirit as a fighter is that he wants to test himself in all areas, even if that means him sacrificing the higher ground. For Islam Makhachev to not use the great advantage that he has and not prioritize the great advantage he has over Dustin Poirier in the grappling exchanges, it really showed to me how he allows these fights to become more competitive than maybe they even need to be. One thing that Khabib was always great at was walking down, marching down his opponents, throwing big overhands, leaping uppercuts that would push his opponents backwards, and of course give the opportunity to shoot in on them when their feet are squared up and they're looking to avoid Khabib's hands. Islam Makhachev doesn't impose his will the same way as Khabib Nurmagomedov, and it needs to be made very clear Islam and Khabib fight very, very differently. Islam does not have the same sort of top control and ferocious ground and pound that Khabib Nurmagomedov would use in his fights. Khabib Nurmagomedov had a level of dominance that we have not seen in the octagon since, and the closest that it's been replicated has been Khamzat Chimaev in flashes against lower level competition. Islam Makhachev, when it comes to who he should fight next, he has two options. He's calling out for the Leon fight. That's the fight that he wants, and it could make a big pay-per-view card. Who actually deserves the title shot? That would be Arman Tsarukyan. And everybody knows that Arman Tsarukyan deserves the title shot. He is the unanimous number 2 lightweight in the world right now after beating Charles Oliveira. Arman Tsarukyan, I think, has developed as a fighter. He is reaching the prime of his career. He's put up the most competitive fight against Islam Makhachev in the UFC other than Volkanovski. So I think it's fair that Arman Tsarukyan gets his rematch. And though I can understand that Islam Makhachev doesn't feel like he gets anything out of beating Arman Tsarukyan again, he is still the consensus number 2 lightweight in the world, so he deserves his title shot. Makhachev is able to beat Arman Tsarukyan. It will be a big statement no matter how he gets it done, and he will deserve his right to move up and contend for the welterweight belt. After seeing Islam against Poirier, I don't give him the best chances against Leon. Leon is a bigger, rangier frame. He has more difficult, long-distance weapons when it comes to his kicking game. Yes, Islam Makhachev did have staph infection going into this fight. You can say that may have affected his performance, but I think going up against a bigger, stronger fighter who will be able to shrug you off even easier than Dustin Poirier was able to, I don't give Islam Makhachev the best chances in a 5-round UFC kickboxing fight. So I would have to go with Leon Edwards if those two were to fight. If Belal Muhammad is to become champion, I don't think Islam Makhachev will even contend for the 170 belt because Belal and him have such a close relationship. And when it comes to the Arman Tsarukyan matchup, I think Arman Tsarukyan, being that he has a more dynamic kicking game than Islam, being that he has extremely fast, powerful hands and some very good in and out movement, he does pose some danger to Islam Makhachev, and they also both have very good developed clinch games when it comes to their offensive strikes in the clinch and their trips and throws from the clinch. So their matchup made a very entertaining fight in their first bout. I think the second fight being 5 rounds, we will only get to see an even better, more high-level mixed martial arts fight. And if you want to think about this in terms of pound-for-pound skill, Arman Tsarukyan versus Islam Makhachev may be the most high-level, well-rounded 2 fighters we've ever seen in an octagon ever. For the longest time, I always felt like John Jones versus DC in their first and second matchups, those were the 2 best martial artists we've ever seen step into a cage against each other. Arman Tsarukyan versus Islam Makhachev make a very, very good argument for being the most well-rounded fighters all around to ever step into an octagon and face each other. It's definitely the fight to make, and I'm sure the UFC will do the right thing to make that matchup. As an early prediction, I will have to go with Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan is slightly faster than Islam Makhachev, and if it goes into a 5-round fight, I can see Arman Tsarukyan beginning to outpace Islam as the fight goes on. Like we saw in the first Volkanovski fight, as Islam Makhachev gets tired, you can outwork him. And for all of my Tony fans out there, after seeing how Dustin Poirier was hitting the switch on Islam Makhachev and was able to get out of Islam's submission attempts, prime Tony Ferguson would have taken care of Islam Makhachev in under 3 rounds. Prime Tony Ferguson would make Islam Makhachev look like Gleison Tebow. A prime Tony Ferguson eats Islam Makhachev up for lunch. And that is the better MMA take of the day. If you like the video, like the video. Comment your thoughts on the video down below. I appreciate all the support. Better takes, better vibes, better MMA. We out.